You're gonna miss my loving every day and night. Have no regrets, I'm moving on and on.
What if I told you there was an R&B girl group in the late 90s that had everything? The vocals, the label deal, the look, the album, dropped. The talent, undeniable. But just when it seemed like they were about to blow up, they disappeared. No scandal, no farewell tour, no messy group breakup plastered across tabloids, just silence. We're talking about Forecast, a group RCA Records signed, dressed up, and pushed just enough to keep us interested, before completely ghosting them. So what really happened behind the scenes? Was it label sabotage, industry politics, or did someone in power decide these women would never win? Because here's the truth. Forecast didn't fade out. They were erased. And today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the biggest, what could have been stories in 90s R&B. Strap in, because this rabbit hole gets way darker than you think. Picture this. It's 1998. The airwaves are flooded with R&B girl groups. TLC is unstoppable. Destiny's Child is knocking on superstardom, and labels are scrambling to find the next big thing. Enter Forecast. 4 young women signed to RCA Records, ready to make their mark. No, they weren't an indie act. No, they weren't struggling to get noticed. They had a major label behind them. They dropped a full-length album, Any Weather, and they had a single that could have been a radio hit. Miss My Lovin'. Smooth, sexy, laced with that late-night groove that made you want to dim the lights and hit repeat. They weren't bubblegum pop. They weren't trying to mimic anyone. They had their own lane. Classy, grown, real R&B. But here's the catch. You've probably never heard of them. And if you have, it was likely a random memory sparked by an old CD buried in someone's glove box. So how does a major label girl group with a full album release vanish without a trace? Because behind the polished promo photos and low-budget video shoots, the truth was brutal. Forecast was set up to fail before they even started. Now let's talk about the real villain in this story. Not the group, not internal drama, but the machine behind the music. RCA Records. Because yes, Forecast was signed to a major label. But the way RCA handled them, let's just say, signing a deal doesn't mean they believe in you. In fact, in the late 90s, record labels were signing acts left and right. Not to build them up, but to block the competition. Some artists were nothing more than a placeholder, a warm-up act that never made it past soundcheck. And Forecast, they got the cold shoulder with a smile. Sure, RCA funded a music video for Miss My Lovin'. Sure, they released an album, but go look at the budget. Look at the rollout. No big-name producers, no flashy marketing campaign, no tour slots opening for heavy hitters like Usher or Monica. They were given just enough to say, hey, we tried, but not enough to win. And that's not accidental. That's strategic neglect. You see, RCA at the time was juggling acts like Tyrese, Christina Aguilera, and SWV. And when you're the new girls on the block in a label full of stars, if you're not bringing controversy or chart-topping heat in the first 30 days, they move on. Fast. And here's the kicker. There's evidence that Forecast's debut album didn't even get a proper second single push. That's like throwing a party, inviting nobody, and blaming the guests for not showing up. So the question becomes, did RCA ever intend for Forecast to succeed? Or were they just there to fill a quota, a tax write-off, a plan B if someone else flopped? Because from the outside, it looked like a launch, but from the inside, it was more like a silent burial. Okay, so we've got a group with talent, a label deal, and an album out in the world. And then, nothing. No sophomore album, no solo projects, no press, no drama, no trace. Just pure, eerie silence. And in the music business, silence usually means one of two things. Either a scandal was buried, or the group was iced out so completely they couldn't even speak on it. So what really happened to Forecast? Let's dig deeper. Insiders who were around RCA in the late 90s say the label went through a period of roster cleanup, basically slashing acts they no longer saw as profitable. And it wasn't just Forecast. Other promising R&B acts quietly vanished from RCA's artist pages around the same time. No formal announcements, just a slow erasure. But here's the weird part. Most shelved artists, especially in groups, eventually speak out. Someone goes on IG Live. Someone leaks a behind-the-scenes story to a blog. Someone spills the tea on a podcast years later. But with Forecast, no interviews, no lawsuits, no tell-alls, nothing. It's like they just walked away or were made to. That kind of silence almost never happens, unless there's something deeper. Was there an NDA involved? Did RCA pay them out quietly to just disappear? Were they blackballed from the industry entirely? Now here's the rumor, and this is unconfirmed, but worth saying. Some folks in the indie R&B space claim that two of the members tried to shop themselves around to other labels after RCA dropped them, but got zero callbacks. Like the industry had already decided, this group, off limits. Which brings us to another possibility. Forecast may have been victims of label politics gone wrong. Caught between egos, contract disputes, or internal label drama that they couldn't fight and weren't allowed to talk about. And without a strong manager, without social media to tell their side of the story, and without a breakout hit to keep them visible, they faded into the background, not because they wanted to, but because they were pushed there. Now here's where things get real strange. Usually when a group disappears, somebody resurfaces. Maybe one member drops a mixtape. Maybe another pivots to acting or reality TV. Maybe they hop on Twitter and start spilling tea for the nostalgia clicks. But with Forecast, dead, silent, digital, ghosts, no verified social media accounts, no solo projects, no behind-the-scenes songwriting credits, no reunion whispers, not even one of those "where are they now?" blurbs on throwback R&B sites. It's like they vanished from the internet entirely. And in a world where even the most obscure 90s groups have some kind of digital footprint, that's not just strange, that's deliberate. Now, some fans have tried to play detective, scouring old RCA records, searching for legal filings, trying to match names and faces to LinkedIn profiles and small-town social media pages. Theories range from they changed careers completely, one of them became a nurse, another might have gone into education, maybe they went back to church music, but nothing's been verified. And that's the part that haunts fans the most. These weren't women who flopped publicly, they didn't self-destruct, they didn't burn bridges, they just disappeared with grace. Which begs the question, did they choose silence, or were they forced into it? Was there a gag order involved? Were they blackballed by someone higher up? Or did they just have enough of the industry, the broken promises, the stress, and decide to live normal lives? Here's the wildest part. Even if they did want to tell their story now, would anyone let them? Because in this business, the truth is often buried so deep under NDAs, hush money, and time, the people holding the secrets don't even remember the lies. So now we're left with nothing but a name, an album that barely cracked the surface, and a story that slipped right through the cracks. At this point, it's bigger than Forecast. Because their story, it's not an isolated incident. It's part of a long, ugly pattern. A system that lifts up black girl groups just long enough to make money off their image, then tosses them aside once the label's priorities shift. Let's call it what it is, music industry disposal culture. And if you're a black girl group, you're disposable twice as fast. Let's break it down. In the late 90s and early 2000s, girl groups were everywhere. TLC, Destiny's Child, En Vogue, 702, Black, SWV Total, Escape. And while some of them made it, the rest dropped, undermarketed, silently shelved, and forgotten. Even groups with certified hits couldn't escape the cut. You remember ISIS? What about Before Dark, The Rain, or Nuttin' Nice? Each one had the look. Each one had the vocals. Each one got chewed up by the same system that never invested in them long enough to truly succeed. And here's the twist most people miss. It wasn't just about music. It was about marketability. It was about image politics. And yes, it was about race. Because while pop girl groups like Spice Girls, Dream, and 3LW were given time to evolve, to rebrand, to recover from mistakes, black girl groups got one shot, one single, one album. And if it didn't chart within 3 weeks, game over. No second chance, no label loyalty, just quiet removal from the roster and a press release that never came. Even Destiny's Child, with all their success, had to fight tooth and nail just to keep Beyoncé at the front. And remember, TLC, one of the best-selling girl groups of all time, and they went broke. So imagine being Forecast. No hits, no drama, no press machine. They were never given a chance to fight for their spot. Because the second you weren't trending, labels moved on to the next batch of girls. And if you didn't have a Beyoncé, a Left Eye, or a Kelly Rowland level standout, you were toast. But here's the part that really stings. The labels knew these girls were talented, they knew the music was solid, they just didn't care. They were chasing trends, and black girl groups were only hot when it suited the label's marketing calendar. So no, Forecast didn't flop. They were strategically erased. Their failure wasn't about music. It was about power, positioning, and perception. And the industry never gave them a real shot at legacy. So after all the silence, the mystery, the lost potential, what's left? What do we do with the story of a group like Forecast? Because let's be honest, they didn't get a farewell tour. They didn't get a second chance. They didn't even get a viral TikTok resurrection like some 90s acts have. But maybe, just maybe, that's why their story matters even more. Because Forecast represents every artist who had the talent, but not the timing. Every group that was good, but not protected. Every black girl group that got tossed aside, not because they failed, but because someone in a boardroom decided they weren't worth the effort. And what's wild? Their debut album, Any Weather, is actually good. It's smooth. It's soulful. It holds up. But most people never even heard it because it was released and immediately left to die. And here's the part that really hits. That album, for most of us, wasn't just forgotten. It was never even introduced. Think about that. How many more Forecasts are out there? How many voices did we never get to hear? How many careers were quietly ended before they even began? So what's the legacy of Forecast? It's the reminder that music history is full of ghosts, and not every silence is an accident. Sometimes it's designed. Sometimes it's the result of a broken machine, one that takes black women, puts them on stage, then turns off the lights the moment they stop being profitable. And that's why we're telling their story now, not just to mourn what was lost, but to say, on record, they existed, they mattered, and they deserved better. If you've made it this far, if you're sitting there thinking, damn, I forgot all about Forecast, or I never even heard of them, you're not alone. But now, you know, and it's on us to remember these artists and to talk about why they were never allowed to win. So do this. Go stream Any Weather if you can find it. Drop a comment with your favorite forgotten R&B group. And if you were a fan of Forecast, tell us everything. Share your memories. Let their story live somewhere. Because whether the industry gave them flowers or not, we still can. Smash that like button, subscribe for more R&B deep dives, and tap the bell so you never miss another lost story the industry tried to bury. This has been the untold truth about Forecast, a group with all the talent in the world, who were left out of the history books. Forecast didn't fade out. They were erased by an industry that never gave them a chance to shine.